Hello and welcome to the Analyst dated 7th October 2024 by Vachiraman Ravi. In today's Analyst, we are going to look into these 9 set of topics which are featured in The Hindu and Indian Express, and the handout of this very discussion is available in the description below for your reference. Coming to the first topic, in this we'll be analyzing India-Maldives relation. We'll try to understand that how relations have evolved between the two nations, why the two nations are important to each other, what are the areas of concerns between the two nations, and what steps India need to take in order to restore its strategic ties with Maldives. Moving on to the second topic, in this we'll try to understand what are the different kinds of violence which the healthcare professionals in India witness, what are the underlying causes for that, what are the impact, what legal safeguards we have in place, and what more needs to be done in order to ensure safety and dignity of healthcare professionals in India. Moving on to the last 7 set of topics, in this we'll try to decode the context in the most lucid manner possible. So stay tuned. So let's begin with the first topic, which is India-Maldives relation. What is the context? So recently, the Maldives President Mohammad Mizur is on a 4-day visit to India. And in this backdrop, it is expected that the Maldivian President would be requesting India's support in form of currency swap agreement and debt waiver. Why? Because when you look at Maldivian economy, it is having high debt to GDP ratio and its foreign exchange reserves are dwindling. And when you look at the credit rating agencies like Moody and Fitch, they have already downgraded the rating of Maldives in the current week. And if Maldives defaulted on any of its debt obligation, then the economic crisis that we witnessed recently in Sri Lanka, the same could be witnessed in Maldives. In this backdrop, let's just analyze India-Maldives relation in much greater detail. Now, the first thing that we need to understand is how India-Maldives relation has evolved over a period of time. Now, firstly, when Maldives got independence in 1965 from Britain, India was the first nation to establish diplomatic relations with Maldives, and we were the first to recognize Maldives as an independent nation. Then, in 1979, both countries signed Maritime Boundary Agreement, which basically demarcated or defined the maritime boundaries between the two nations. Then there were years of turbulence or years of strain. Now, there was a coup attempt in 1988, and in this backdrop, to restore political stability in Maldives, the Indian military forces basically intervened in domestic politics of Maldives under Operation Cactus. And they were able to thwart this coup attempt, and they were able to restore political stability. But it strained India-Maldives relation because we were interfering in domestic politics of Maldives. But again, the relations got normalized in 2008. Okay, as Mohammad Nasheed became the president. And we basically enhanced cooperation in the economic domain when it comes to trade, when it comes to education. India provided support to Maldives when it comes to building infrastructure projects, and it also helped Maldives in capacity building. Then again, there was period of strain between 2013 and 2018. Why? Because Abdullah Yameen became the president of Maldives in 2013, and he had a pro-China approach. Okay, so during his tenure, he imposed emergency, which basically throttled the democracy when it comes to Maldives nation, and he signed a free trade agreement with China in 2017. So in this backdrop, India-Maldives relation got severely strained. But again, the engagement got renewed and restored when Ibrahim Mohamed Solih became the president in 2018, because he adopted India's first approach. Okay, so invited India to invest in majority of the infrastructure project. For example, the Great Malay Connectivity Project. Now, the next aspect that we need to understand is why Maldives is important for India. First is its strategic location. It is in proximity of Indian western coast. So it is barely 70 nautical miles from Minicoy Island, and it is 300 nautical miles away from India's west coast. So from security perspective, Maldives is very crucial for India. Okay, or to ensure regional security and regional stability also, Maldives is very crucial for India. Then when you look at from the economic perspective also, Maldives is situated in proximity to important sea lanes of communication, from which around 50% of India's external trade passes and around 80% of India's energy import pass through. Then from security perspective also, Maldives is very important. Why? Because it is actually acting as a toll gate between the choke points of Western Indian Ocean and Eastern Indian Ocean. When you talk about Western Indian Ocean, the choke points are Gulf of Aden, Strait of Hormuz, and Eastern Indian Ocean, Strait of Malacca. And Maldives is very important for India to basically monitor the Chinese activities in the Indian Ocean region and to ensure overall regional stability and security. Then when it comes to regional stability, the prosperity of Maldives is in alignment with India's neighborhood first policy. And we also have cultural links with Maldives. So until first half of the 12th century, Buddhism was the dominant religion when it comes to Maldives Island. And we also have great people-to-people ties because we have a significant Indian diaspora which is working in Maldives Island in fields like hospitality, tourism, education, healthcare, etc. Now, the next aspect that we need to understand is why India is significant for Maldives. First is the economic area. When you look at this particular data, which gives you the data regarding the tourist arrival in Maldives, when it comes to Maldives, it is a tourism-based economy. And according to this particular data, in 2023, Maldives saw the highest number of tourists from India. Okay. Then India is Maldives' second largest trade partner in 2022. And when you talk about the trade relation, India basically supply the essential commodities like rice, spices, fruits, vegetable, essential medicines, etc. When you talk about defense, the two countries have signed comprehensive action plan in 2016 to consolidate their defense planning, okay, or to consolidate their defense partnership. And 70% of Maldives defense training is catered by India. Either this training could be provided on Maldives Island also or in the elite military academies of India. Then when you talk about development and capacity building, India has provided huge investment when it comes to developing the Greater Male Connectivity Project. Then we are also developing Hani Madho International Airport Project. And we have already opened the National College for Policing and Law Enforcement in 2022. When you talk about disaster relief, here also India is providing assistance to Maldives. In 2014, when Mali witnessed a drinking water crisis because a huge desalination plant broke out. Okay, so there was drinking water crisis. So India basically provided drinking water overnight under Operation Neer. And then during the COVID-19 pandemic also, we provided the PPE kits, the mask, the COVID shield vaccines, essential drugs, etc. Then in the education area also, India has opened up Institute of Technical Education in 1996 and India is providing training to Maldivian teachers and youth, okay, especially with regard to vocational training. Then in the area of security also, we have already discussed the Operation Cactus, that how Indian military forces were able to thwart the coup attempt when it comes to Maldives. And they were able to restore political stability in Maldives. The two nations also carry out joint exercises like Ikuverin Dosti Ikatha. Then India is also providing humanitarian assistance to Maldives. We are already investing in high impact community development projects, which are basically socio-economic development projects. Then India has provided around this many Covishield vaccines to Maldives during COVID-19 pandemic. And under Operation Sanjeevani also, India has supplied around this much tons of essential medicines during the COVID-19 pandemic. So this highlights that both the countries are significant or important for each other. Now let's just understand what are the areas of concerns when it comes to the two nations. First is India Out campaign. Now the current president, that is Mohammad Muizzu, was able to come into power with this political movement, that is India Out campaign. Under this, he has mobilized the Maldivian citizens to basically remove the Indian military from the Maldivian soil. Then there are tourism issues also. Recently, when the Honorable Prime Minister paid a visit to Lakshadweep, and here in the Lakshadweep, as the Indian government is planning to develop the tourism potential of Lakshadweep, it is seen as a threat to the tourism industry when it comes to Maldives. Because remember, we discussed that when it comes to Maldives, it is a tourism-based economy. Okay, so since we are trying to develop the Lakshadweep island, we are trying to develop the tourism potential of Lakshadweep, this is seen as a threat by the Maldivians. Okay, and this has escalated tensions between the two nations. Certain ministers, when it comes to Maldives, have made derogatory remarks against the Honorable Prime Minister of India. Then Maldives has revocated the hydrographic survey agreement. It has raised reservations in this regard. It has pointed out that India might be collecting intelligence inputs under this hydrographic survey agreement. So that is why it has revoked this particular agreement. This has again raised concerns. It has strained the relation between the two nations. Then China. We discussed, and when we were discussing how the relations has evolved between the two nations, we discussed that in 2017, the then Maldives president signed a free trade agreement with China. And China has made great investments when it comes to Maldives under its Belt and Road initiatives. And in this backdrop, India has raised concerns that in future, China might be using these naval bases for military purposes. And this could have security implications for India. And it could also have security implications when it comes to the regional security also. Then another pertinent issue is radicalization. According to various studies, it has been found out that various Maldivian citizens are joining such extremist group like Islamic State. And in this backdrop, India has raised concerns that such extremist or radicalized group might be using Maldivian soil to plan and execute attack on India as well as Indian assets. Now, the last thing that we need to understand is what more needs to be done in order to restore the strategic ties between the two countries. First and foremost, India should make sure that it carries out open and transparent communication with the leaders of Maldivian new government. Okay. We need to make them aware that the projects in which the India is investing, it is going to boost the tourism potential of Maldives only, like Honey Madhu project. Okay. And it should basically raise its concerns. Okay, the two countries should have dialogue with each other on multilateral forums, and they should build trust in that background. Then the two countries should focus on common interest areas like climate change, like maritime security, piracy, etc. This could strengthen the relation between the two nations. Then both countries should respect the sovereignty of each other, and they should not interfere in domestic politics of each other. Okay, this would further help in building trust between the two nations. Then the two countries need to strengthen people-to-people ties. How can we do that? By carrying out cultural exchange programs, by cooperating in areas like education, health, etc. Okay, and India should target the youth when it comes to Maldives. It should provide adequate skill training in the new age skill set like data analytics, artificial intelligence, robotics, etc. And it should provide vocational skill training to the youth so that they are effectively employed, and so that we can effectively curb the issue of radicalization of Maldivian youth. Okay, which would help us in making sure that the Maldivian soil is not used for carrying out or planning or executing attacks on India. Okay, by making use of Maldivian soil. That's all that we have to learn with regard to this particular topic. This is a practice question for you. Do practice this particular question and let me know in the comment section. Let's move on to the next topic. Moving on to the next topic, which is related to violence against healthcare professionals. What is the context? So recently, the resident doctors at the state-run hospital in West Bengal are on a hunger strike. Why? Because they are demanding safety and security at the medical colleges. Why? Because this is in the backdrop of the recent rape and murder of a female doctor in one of the medical hospitals in the state of West Bengal. This particular topic is related to this aspect of our GS Paper 2 syllabus. The first thing that we need to understand is what are healthcare professionals? So according to National Commission for Allied and Healthcare Professionals Act 2021, it basically consists of the doctors, the nurses, the scientists, and all those people who are providing preventive, curative, rehabilitative, promotive healthcare services in India. Now, let's just understand what are the different kind of violence which the healthcare professionals witness in India. So according to a paper which was published in National Medical Journal of India in 2016, 75% of the violence against doctors is in verbal form, which basically includes intimidation, threats, derogatory remarks against the doctors. Then majority of the workplace violence is directed at junior doctors and resident doctors. And the section which is at most risk, that is the female medical professionals, because they are at the receiving end of both the physical as well as verbal workplace violence. Okay. Now, the next thing that we need to understand is what are the challenges, why we are not able to ensure safety and security of our medical healthcare professionals. First is inadequate security provisions. Now, we do not have any central legislation in place. Why? Because public health is a state subject. So we have different state laws, but these state laws are not clear with the definitions. They are not able to cover the different sort of violence which are witnessed by the medical healthcare professionals in specific context. And there is a lot of variations when it comes to the state laws. According to a survey which was carried out by Indian Medical Association, it found out that around 1/3 of the doctors feel insecure, especially when they are working in night shifts. Okay. Then there are infrastructural issues also. We do not have CCTV surveillance in place, which could effectively monitor the entry and exit of people when it comes to hospital and the sensitive areas. Then we do not have enough resting rooms, especially when the doctors are working on the night shift. And this is sadly the case in the recent rape and murder case which has happened in West Bengal. That female doctor was working on a night shift and she did not have any effective resting place. And this has been highlighted by Indian Medical Association survey again, that there is lack of sanitation facilities, there is lack of resting facility when it comes to the medical healthcare professionals. And then we do not have any screening facility to make sure that the relatives of the patient are not carrying any such of arms and ammunition or weapons along with them. Then IMA has pointed out that the medical professionals have sometime they have to work for around 36-hour shift, and this makes them vulnerable to violence because then they are not able to take decisions effectively, which could compromise the health of the patients and which at times lead to violent activities from the relatives of the patients. Then there is unrestricted access to patient and their attendants. According to a study, it was found out that in majority of the cases, in more than 80% of the cases, what we have found out, the violence is basically done by the relatives of the patients. Okay, and why this is so? Because there is poor communication between the medical healthcare professionals and the relatives of the patient. There is no effective medical counseling facility which is available. The medical healthcare professionals are not trained in conflict resolution, de-escalation techniques, etc. So on account of these reasons, we are not able to ensure safety and security of medical healthcare professionals when it comes to India. Now, what are the impacts of this? So they could witness physical harm or injuries like fractures, etc. It could lead to psychological trauma. They might witness post-traumatic disorder, anxiety, depression, etc. This could basically impair the quality of care. Now, if a doctor is not feeling secure in its workplace, then he would not be able to take effective decisions when it comes to, curing or taking care of the patient, which might compromise the health of the patients also, which could further escalate such violence incidents when it comes to the medical healthcare professionals. Then it could lead to retention and recruitment challenges also. If the doctors or medical healthcare professionals would not feel secure when it comes to the workplace, they might leave the medical profession, and this could lead to shortage of skilled manpower when it comes to healthcare sector, especially in the rural areas. Then it could deteriorate the doctor-patient relation, it could strain the doctor-patient relation, and it could, further magnify the communication gap between them. This could further give rise to violent attacks against the medical professionals. Now, let's just understand what are the legal safeguards we have in place in this backdrop. So, central government has done amendment to this Epidemic Disease Act, okay? It brought ordinances in this regard to basically protect the medical healthcare professional during the COVID-19 pandemic. So this ordinance basically made the acts of violence against healthcare workers a cognizable as well as non-bailable offence. What is a cognizable offence? Wherein the police officer does not need a court warrant to arrest that person who has committed this particular crime. And cognizable offences basically cover the heinous crimes like rape, murder, etc. In this regard, the investigation needs to be completed within 30 days and judgment should be delivered within 1 year. In case a person has done some violent activity against the medical healthcare professional, then such a person would be liable to punishment that could be imprisonment up to 7 years and fine up to 5 lakh in case of grievous injuries. And accused would have to pay compensation twice the market value of damaged properties. Now, as we discussed that currently we do not have a central legislation in this regard. So we have different state laws which basically cater to this. For example, we have the law in place in Kerala. Then in this regard, since we do not have a central legislation, the opposition political parties and the doctors also are demanding that the central government should come up with a central legislation. Okay, and in this regard, a bill was introduced in 2019, but ultimately it was withdrawn. And in that bill also, such violent acts of violence were made non-bailable offence and heavier penalties were imposed. Okay, it was intended under that bill, but ultimately that bill was withdrawn later on. Then when you look at the act which is in place in Kerala, it has also included under the ambit of this law the paramedical students, the security staff, the managerial staff which is associated with the hospitals. Okay, then it is also proposed that we should set in place fast track court in order to provide swift justice to the victims. Now, last thing that we need to understand is what more needs to be done in order to ensure safety and dignity of medical healthcare professionals in India. So, we need to come up with a comprehensive legislation. Right now we discussed we do not have central legislation in place. So, in this backdrop, the center and state should collaborate. They should, do consensus building in this regard, and they should come up with a central comprehensive legislation in this backdrop to overcome the, the variations in the state laws in this regard also. We need to improve the reporting mechanism. So, we need to provide whistleblower protection. We could also open channels wherein people could report such acts of violence to the investigative agencies also. Then we need to enhance security mechanisms. So, in this, we basically need to address the infrastructural issues. We need to put in place CCTV surveillance. We need to put in place trained security personnels, okay, to provide security to medical healthcare professionals. Then we need to put in place effective transportation facilities, especially for the female medical professionals when they are working in the night shift, etc. Then we need to provide support services basically to those medical healthcare professionals who are a victim of such violent acts. So in this regard, we need to provide counseling services to them, mental health care support to them. Okay, we need to train them that with regard to de-escalation techniques, conflict resolution techniques, and we need to train them that how they can do self-defense. Okay, all this would help them to deal with such situations effectively. Then in this regard, a collaborative effort is needed. So all the stakeholders, that is the government, the civil society, medical associations, medical healthcare professionals, they all need to come up. The government should anticipate, should collaborate with them, and it should effectively understand what are the concerns of the medical healthcare professional, and accordingly we should come up with a comprehensive legislation in this backdrop. And when it comes to coming up with a central legislation or a comprehensive legislation in this with regard to this particular issue, we should learn from the best international practices also. So when you look at UK, they have a zero tolerance policy on violence when it comes to medical healthcare professional, and they have a effective reporting mechanism and a security team for this thing also. And we can also learn from the best example of Australia, wherein they have put adequate safety measures, like they have put in place trained security personnel to ensure the safety of medical professionals, okay, panic buttons and mandatory de-escalation training, which enables the medical healthcare professionals to effectively deal with such violent situations effectively. That's all that we have to learn with regard to this particular topic. We have put in place a practice question for you. So do practice this particular question and leave the answer in the comment section. Let's move on to the next topic. So what is the context? So Monetary Policy Committee is scheduled to meet from 7th October till 9th October. And in this backdrop, various economists are making a guess that whether we are going to witness a cut in the repo rate or not. This particular article deals with this aspect of our prelim syllabus and this aspect of our GS paper 3 syllabus. Let's decode the context. So the newly reconstituted Monetary Policy Committee is scheduled to meet in the next week. And it is likely that it would be keeping the policy rate, that is the repo rate, unchanged. What is repo rate? It is the rate at which the RBI gives liquidity facility to the banks, which is basically backed by collateral. It could be government securities or other approved securities. It could be the 10th consecutive monetary policy wherein the repo rate would remain unchanged. However, various economists are anticipating that in the December, we might witness a cut in the repo rate. Many economists believe that in this upcoming meeting, we might witness a change in the monetary policy stance from withdrawal of accommodation to neutral. In this backdrop, the first thing that we need to understand is what is Monetary Policy Committee. So it was set up after a memorandum of understanding was signed between the government and the RBI with regard to the new inflation targeting monetary policy framework, under which it has been stated that the central bank has to make sure that inflation remains within this particular bandwidth, that is 2% to 6%. Now for this, what we did, we amended the RBI Act of 1934 with the Finance Act of 2016, which provided statutory backing to Monetary Policy Committee. And under this particular act, we have a section 45ZB, which gave the central government the power to constitute a 6-member Monetary Policy Committee. Let me know in the comment section who all form a part of this Monetary Policy Committee. Now, what is the primary function of this particular committee? So, it has to fix the benchmark policy rate, that is the repo rate, and it has to make sure that the inflation remains within the bandwidth of 2% to 6%. Now, it takes the decision on the majority, and if there is a tie, then the RBI governor would have a casting vote. And the decision of this very committee are binding on RBI. Going further, a large number of economists are anticipating that repo rate would remain untouched or it would remain unchanged. Why? Because the food inflation is on a rise, especially we are witnessing rise in vegetable prices. Whereas other set of economists are anticipating that we might witness a cut in the repo rate. Why? Because the inflation is already aligned to 4% target and the growth signals are softening. Now, in this backdrop, what we need to understand further is what are the various monetary policy stance of RBI. First is accommodative stance. In this, the central government is prepared to expand the monetary policy to basically boost the economic growth. So what does this imply? If you want to boost the economic growth, you have to increase the money supply, and for this you need to reduce the interest rate. So when the central bank has accommodative stance, this implies that a rate hike is ruled out. Okay, it would be moving in the direction of cut in the interest rate. Okay, this approach or this stance is adopted by the central bank when growth needs policy support and the inflation is not the immediate concern. Then the second is neutral stance, as the word itself signifies that when the central bank is having neutral stance, this implies that the central bank can either cut or increase the interest rate. Okay, this is adopted when the policy priority is equal on both inflation and growth. Then we have hawkish stance. It indicates that the top priority of central bank is to keep inflation low. If you want to keep inflation low, what you need to do? You need to increase the interest rate. Okay. During this phase, the central bank is willing to hike the interest rate to basically curb the money supply and thus reduce the demand. And when the central bank would be increasing the rates, interest rate, this would be increasing the rates of interest on loans to the end borrower. So basically your EMI obligations might increase. Then last stance is calibrated tightening. It basically implies that we are talking about tightening of monetary policy. So when in the current rate cycle, a cut in the repo rate is off the table. That is when you say that the central bank is having calibrated tightening. Okay. So this implies what? That a reduction in the interest rate is off the table. Okay. Because we are going to tighten the monetary policy. That means we are going to increase the interest rate. So in this, rate hike will happen but in a calibrated manner or in a phased manner. This means that the central government may not go for a rate increase in every policy meeting, but overall policy stance is tilted towards a rate hike. That's all that we have to learn with regard to this particular topic. Let's move to the next one. Now, recently, the External Affairs Minister, that is the S. Jaishankar, has pointed out that on account of globalization, what we are witnessing is the countries are becoming more interdependent on each other, but the trade is also now being weaponized. This particular article deals with this aspect of our prelim syllabus and this aspect of our GS paper 3 syllabus. So what is the context? So the External Affairs Minister, that is S. Jaishankar, has pointed out that we are witnessing rise in protectionism when you talk about India or when you talk about West also. Especially it is targeted against the Chinese imports, especially in the crucial sectors like the solar cells, the electric vehicles, etc. And Mr. Jaishankar has also pointed out that one of the major impact of globalization is we are witnessing job losses and the quality of life in many of the societies have also gone down. And another concern which he has highlighted is on account of conflicts that is happening in West Asia, in Ukraine, what is happening is the shift of global politics we are witnessing. The global politics is not focusing upon crucial issues like climate change, like reforms of multilateral development banks, like the India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor, etc. So on account of these conflicts or in wars that is happening in Ukraine or in West Asia, the global politics is not focusing on these crucial issues, which it should focus. Now, he has also pointed out further that on one hand, the world is becoming deeply globalized. What does this imply? Now, if you look at a particular product, it is not produced in a single country A fully. Okay. Now, let's suppose we have 3 countries. A particular product, raw materials would be taken from country A. It might be assembled in country B and it would be packed. Okay. The packaging would be done in country C. So, on account of globalization, we are moving in the direction of global supply value chains. Okay. Under this, a particular product is not produced in a particular country only, rather the production takes place in multiple countries. But on the other hand, what is happening on account of globalization is we are witnessing the job losses and we are witnessing deterioration in quality of life also. When it comes to protectionism, we are witnessing this protectionist tendency in US also and in India also that we discussed previously, especially with regard to China. Why? Because we are currently witnessing China Shock 2.0. What is this China Shock 2.0? Currently, the domestic demand in China is quite weak. So what it is doing? It is increasing the exports, okay, to other countries at a very less price, especially in the crucial sectors like steel, like electric vehicles, like solar cells, modules, etc. Okay, and this is leading to job losses, especially in the manufacturing countries of, where the China is exporting its products, and it could also increase the economic dependence on China. That is the reason the countries are moving in the direction of protectionism tendency. Okay, and the first wave of China shock was witnessed in 2001 when China became a member of World Trade Organization. Okay, because at that time also China basically dumped its products in the global market. This term is dumping. What is dumping? Let's suppose a country A is producing a particular product as X cost in its own country. Okay, but it is exporting that particular product to B country. Now, in its country, it is charging around Y price. A particular company is charging Y price for a particular product in its domestic, economy. But when it is exporting that product to country B, it is charging a price which is less than this domestic price also. This is what is called as dumping. Okay. Then, what is India doing in this backdrop? So, we have increased anti-subsidy when it comes to the Chinese imports, and when you talk about 2024, India has imposed over 30 anti-dumping measures against the Chinese products. Okay, and the targeted products basically includes the plastic processing machines, vacuum insulated flasks, welded stainless steel pipes, etc. Okay, and in this backdrop, the Indian business are demanding for extension of these anti-subsidy measures. Why? Because they highlight that when it comes to China's economy, it is not a market-based economy, and it basically makes use of predatory methods. What is predatory method? Let's just understand it with the help of example. Now, suppose there is a company A, it produces a product B at cost X. So, the cost of production is X. Okay. But when it comes to selling this product in the market, it is selling the product at a price which is even less than the cost of production. Why it is doing so? To basically eliminate its competitors. And once the competitors would be out from the market, it would be exploiting its monopolistic tendencies. Okay, monopolistic position. So what it would do? It would then raise the price manifold and to basically recover the losses which it has made. Okay, once the competitors have gone out from the market. This is what we are witnessing when it comes to the telecom industry in India. Okay, now another concern which the External Affairs Minister of India has pointed out, that currently the economic transactions increasingly involve technology. So the countries are willing to compromise economic efficiencies for sake of national security. That is the reason when you look at India also, we are promoting Make in India when it comes to electronic sectors. Okay. Why? Because we want to make sure that our national security is maintained to keep in mind to ensure the privacy protection of Indian citizens, etc. and to make sure that we do not witness job losses, especially in the manufacturing sectors. Now, although Mr. Jaishankar has pointed out that on account of recent conflicts which is going on in Ukraine, West Asia, that has diverted the attention of the global politics when it comes to crucial matters, okay, like climate change, etc. But when it comes to India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, we have made certain developments in this regard. So currently India is collaborating with UAE, okay, and it is also carrying out feasibility studies with the Saudi Arabia. And in this backdrop, the External Affairs Minister has also pointed out, with the rising risk, okay, in various technologies, India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor becomes all the more important. Why? So that we can diversify our trade relations with other countries and we can reduce our economic dependence on China. Because if you look at Indian economy also, we are dependent on China when it comes to steel, we are dependent on China when it comes to electronics, we are dependent on China when it comes to solar cells and modules, we are dependent on China when it comes to active pharmaceutical ingredients. Okay, so in this backdrop, it becomes all the more important that India carry out the talks and dialogues when it comes to India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor. That's all that we have to learn with regard to this topic. Let's move to the next one. Now, an editorial has appeared in The Hindu. It basically deals with PM internship scheme. This particular topic deals with this aspect of a prelim syllabus and this aspect of a GS paper 3 syllabus. So what's the context? So recently the government has launched an online portal to basically give effect to one of the announcements which it has made under the recent union budget. And this announcement was dealing with employment and skilling of youth in India. This portal is going to operationalize the PM internship schemes. Okay, and what is the ultimate objective of this scheme? So under this particular scheme, the government is planning to create job opportunities and to provide skills to around 4.1 crore youth over a time span of 5 years. Why this scheme becomes important? Because if you look at India Employment Report of 2024, India's working population has increased manifold. So it was around 61% in 2011 and it has increased to 64% in 2021. And it is projected that it would be reaching to around 65% by 2036. And when you look at unemployment data which has been given by Center for Monitoring of Indian Economy, the unemployment rate has increased, okay, when you look at the August data and when you look at the July data. So in this backdrop, this particular schemes become important. Let's just understand what are the different schemes which were introduced by the government in the recent budget. So these are the three schemes. The first scheme was the first timers. So under this, 1 month wage to the new entrant in all formal sectors would be reimbursed to that particular person by the government in 3 installments up to 15,000. Then to incentivize job creation, especially in the manufacturing sector, the government has come up with a scheme wherein if the manufacturing companies provide employment to first time employees, okay, then the government would be incentivizing both the employee and the employer when it comes to EPFO contributions. Okay, in specified scale for first 4 years. Then it also intends to incentivize employment generation when it comes to other areas apart from manufacturing. So in this again, the government would be reimbursing EPFO contribution of employers up to 3,000 per month for 2 years for all new hirings. Okay. Then when it comes to the skilling program, what we are planning under this, 20 lakh youth would be skilled over a time period of 5 years, and we are planning to put in place 1,000 industrial training institutes which would be upgraded in a hub and spoke arrangement, and the course content and design would be aligned keeping in mind the skill set which is demanded by the industry. In order to increase the participation of women when it comes to the workforce, what the government is planning, the government is setting up working women hostels in collaboration with the industry, and we are also trying to put in place the crèche facility. Then the government is also providing skilling loans and educational loans. Then coming back to the news, under this what we are planning to do, so the companies who are willing to offer on-job training, they have joined this particular portal. It is a center funded scheme, and this particular scheme would help us in filling or bridging the gap that is between the education which is provided in the educational institutions and the skill set which is desired by the employers. Okay. And After the end of the internship, such youth could also be provided with the certification. Okay, that would help them in getting employment at a future date. And this would help us to address this particular question which the employers often ask, that they can get the job, but can they get the job done or not? Okay, so under this pilot project, firstly, we are catering to 1.5 lakh interns. On a voluntary basis, we have begun this portal. Companies are willing to join this particular scheme. Okay. And the government in this regard has consulted the industry bodies when it comes to formulating and when it comes to announcing this particular scheme. But the government is cautious here. Before coming up with the final scheme, it has launched a pilot project. Okay. And this has been highlighted by the writer that this thing the government has done right. Okay. Now, whatever lessons we'll be learning from this pilot scheme, that would help us in designing the final scheme effectively. And the effect of this pilot project could be, monitored only after December 2025, because after that, we'll be looking into that how many interns who have been able to get on-job training under this PM internship schemes were able to re-enter the job market. And we need to effectively monitor the dropout rates, grievances, in order to effectively plan the final scheme in this regard. Now, one challenge which the writer has pointed out with regard to this PM internship scheme is, we are planning to place the interns within or near their district. And if that is not the case, then within their state. Now, the concern is, the demand for internship would be high in states like Bihar, which are less industrialized. So, how are you going to provide the on-job skill training to such, youth who are basically residing in state of Bihar? Because when you look at the manufacturing output, it is half of the India's manufacturing output is concentrated, or it is coming from these 5 states according to annual survey of industries. Okay, so this is a challenge which the government needs to address. Further, the writer has pointed out that we need to make sure that under this PM internship scheme, we are providing digital and soft skill also to the interns, which is very well needed in the modern workplace. And we need to effectively monitor and evaluate this pilot project so that when it comes to the final scheme, we are able to come up with an effective scheme. Okay, that's all that we need to learn with regard to this particular topic. Let's move to the next one. Now, recently a news has come up wherein Russia is targeting the capital city of Ukraine and the Odessa port. This particular article deals with this aspect of our prelims syllabus. So what is the context? So Russia has been targeting the Ukrainian capital city Kiev and the Black Sea port of Odessa with the drones. Okay. However, from the time this Russia-Ukraine war has begun, Russia has been denying that it is targeting the civilians. But on a regular basis, Russia has been launching missiles, drones and bombs, especially at the population centers. Now, what we need to know with regard to this particular topic is facts regarding Odessa port. Now, this is the Ukraine's biggest Black Sea port, as you can see here. Okay, and UNESCO has also designated this particular port as a World Heritage and Danger Site. Why? Because it is constantly under threat since the Russia's Ukraine invasion. And this designation by UNESCO would help in protecting the Odessa's cultural heritage, which has been under constant threat since the Russia's invasion of Ukraine. It is also called Pearl by the Sea and it is a warm water port. Another thing that we need to know is facts regarding Black Sea. Now, it is a large inland sea which is located at the southeastern extremity of Europe. It is surrounded by these countries: Russia, Georgia, Turkey, Bulgaria, Romania, okay, and Ukraine. And when you look at the coastline, Russia shares the longest coastline, followed by Turkey and Ukraine. Now, when it comes to the Black Sea, it is connected with Sea of Azov with Kerch Strait. It is connected with Sea of Marmara with Bosphorus Strait, and it is connected with Aegean Sea with Dardanelles Strait. Okay, and it receives fresh water from various rivers like Danube, Southern Bug, Dnieper, etc. And it is the world's largest anoxic basin. What do we mean by anoxic basin? This area has very little dissolved oxygen. That's all that we know with regard to this particular topic. Let's move to the next one. Now, recently, the Chief Minister of UP has unveiled the logo, website and a mobile app for Mahakumbh 2025. This particular article deals with this aspect of our GS paper 1 syllabus. So what is the context? So Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath has unveiled logo, website and a mobile app for Mahakumbh 2025. And he has set the deadline, that is December 10, to complete all the arrangements or preparation that needs to be done when it comes to organization of Mahakumbh Mela. And to make sure that there is zero discharge of waste when it comes to Ganga and Yamuna river, he has already made an arrangement. He has put in place 10,000 workers, sanitation workers, to make sure that there is zero discharge of waste when it comes to these particular rivers. Okay, so that these rivers could flow uninterrupted even after the Mahakumbh Mela. Now, we need to know certain aspects with regard to Mahakumbh or with regard to Kumbh Mela. It has been included under the UNESCO representative list of intangible cultural heritage of humanity. Let me know in the comment section what are the other intangible cultural heritage from India which are included in this particular UNESCO list. Then, when it comes to Kumbh Mela, it is the largest peaceful congregation of pilgrims wherein basically the pilgrims take a dip or bath in the sacred rivers. What are the sacred rivers? So, they take a dip or they take a bath in Godavari river in Nasik, Shipra river in Ujjain, Ganga river in Haridwar, and when it comes to Prayagraj, this Kumbh Mela is organized at the confluence, which is also referred to be a Sangam, of the three rivers, Ganga, Yamuna and the mythical Saraswati river. Now, this Kumbh Mela is held at each of this above mentioned location once every 12 years. But when you talk about Kumbh Mela, which is organized in Haridwar, it is held after 11 years and not on the usual 12 years. This is on account of specific auspicious dates. Now, when you talk about Allahabad, okay, here after every 6th year, we have Ardh Kumbh Mela. And on an annual basis, we also have a Magh Mela, which is celebrated in the month of Magh, which is mid-January to February as per the Hindu calendar. That's all that we need to know with regard to this particular topic. Let's move to the next one. Now, recently, we are witnessing protest in the state of Goa. Why? Because the former chief of Goa RSS has made derogatory remarks against the protector of Goa. This particular article deals with this aspect of our GS paper 1 syllabus. So what is the context? We are witnessing protest in Goa. Why? Because the former Goa unit chief of RSS has made derogatory remarks against the protector of Goa, that is Saint Francis Xavier. Okay, and in this backdrop, people are demanding the arrest of Vellingar. Now, what we need to know? We need to know prelims pointers with regard to Saint Francis Xavier, because previously UPSC has asked a question with regard to Saint Francis Xavier. Now, he was a Catholic missionary and a saint who was also a co-founder of Society of Jesus. He was born in Xavier, which is the kingdom of Navarre, which is currently in present-day Spain. He has led an extensive mission into Asia, especially in India, and he was influential in evangelization work. What is evangelization work? It basically means preaching the religious doctrines with an intent to convert that person into Christianity religion. Okay, and this is something which Saint Francis Xavier has done, especially in India and other countries of Asia also. He was the first Christian missionary to venture into Japan, Borneo and Maluku Island. He was about to extend his missionary preaching in China also, but sadly, on account of fever, he died on Sangchung Island in China in 1552, and after some year, his body was brought back to Goa. So on every year, on 3rd December, the anniversary of Saint Francis Xavier death is celebrated at Basilica of Bom Jesus. Okay, and this annual fest is the biggest of all Christian fests in Goa. Now, in this backdrop, a previous year question has been asked by UPSC. Try and practice this particular question and let me know the answer in the comment section. Let's move to the next topic. Now, the last topic of today's analyst is related to Business Confidence Index, which has been recently released by Confederation of Indian Industries. This particular topic deals with these aspects of our prelim syllabus. So, according to Business Confidence Index, which has been released by Confederation of Indian Industries, the business houses have shown confidence when it comes to the growth momentum in India, despite the global issues that are going on. Okay, why? Because of policy continuity and since the festive season is coming up. Now, in this particular index, the CII has covered more than 200 firms which are of various sizes and across industry sectors and regions. However, the respondents have cautioned that on account of uncertainty in global scenario, we need to be careful when it comes to the economic conditions. Okay, so we need to carefully watch the evolving economic conditions, because on account of the global issues which are going on, for example, the war in Ukraine, the war in West Asia, this could lead to import-led inflation in India. Why? Because India basically meets its demand for oil and gas through imports, and we import basically these commodities from West Asia. So respondents in this particular survey has highlighted these concerns: protracted geopolitical tensions, spike in global commodity prices that were discussed right now, and slowing external demand. Why? Because in the previous article we discussed that protectionism is on a rise across the globe. Now, why then the respondents have showed confidence that we would be witnessing growth momentum in India? So they have pointed certain factors in this regard. What are the factors? Improvement in consumption, especially in the rural areas, steady progress in monsoon, which is going to give boost further to the rural demand in India, continued emphasis on reforms by the government, and fresh sightings in private investment, because more than half of the respondents have anticipated an improvement in private capital expenditure in the first half of financial year 2025. Now, last thing that we need to know with regard to this particular topic is certain aspects with regard to the Confederation of Indian Industries. So, it is a non-government, not-for-profit, industry-led and industry-managed organization. What are its functions? So, it basically makes sure that an environment is created wherein the industries can grow effectively. Okay. So it intends to create and sustain an environment which is conducive for the growth of Indian industries. And in this regard, it consults with the government, industry leaders and the civil society. And it also assists the industries to identify and execute corporate citizenship programs, okay, in diverse domains like livelihood creation, diversity management, skill development, empowerment of women, etc. It was founded in 1895 and it has its headquarters in New Delhi. That's all that we need to learn today from today's analyst. The quiz would be coming right up next. Don't forget to practice the quiz. Thank you for being a patient listener and all the very best for your preparation. Keep learning, keep reading.